Ben Shapiro was recently on the GeorgeJanko podcast, and they talked about many different things. But one of the topics that did come up was about Jesus, and specifically Ben Shapiro calling out Christians, telling them that they need to re engage with their faith and find themselves back in church, and saying that Christians are believing in this weird hippie Jesus. So before we get into this call out that Ben Shapiro made against Christians, if you don't know who George Janko is or Ben Shapiro is, simply put, George Janko is a professing Christian, YouTuber, podcaster. Ben Shapiro is a Jewish man who is a well known, famous debater and political side of things. So, with that being said, let's see what led to Ben Shapiro calling out Christians.
Talk about that because like you're intellectually, bro, you're so fast at like processing what you need to say next and sharing the same field that you're in now. I'm like a baby, and so now I'm just asking questions because I want to learn from you so I don't make the same mistakes. And I've learned that when I get emotional I drill, and it's not from a good place, it's from a fear place. What is a good learning curve that got you away from being emotional, so that way, because what we want to do is we don't want to shatter our opponents, but more convince them to come on our playing side of the field because we truly have faith that our side is the correct way. And how I kind of go about these things is how Jesus Christ did it. And it was very, give them the other cheek, forgive them. And through this, they'll see your fruits and want to come over here.
See, George is approaching this debating thing as, hey, I want to come at it with love. Now, Ben is going to kind of say something different to George.
Although Jesus wasn't above overturning tables and being pretty harsh when he needed to be.
You know what? I've noticed that Jewish people always bring up that is one time. He was very forgiving. Forgive him.
I think that I mean, I'm not going to preach Christianity to Christians, but I think that
I think you do a really good job.
Frankly, I think that Christians should go to church and re-engage with their faith a lot. I think it's really, really important for the country. More people need to go to church. They need to re-engage with the New Testament, and I'm not a big fan of my business partner, Jeremy Boring, who's a lay pastor. He's very fond of saying that he doesn't really believe in sort of the hippie Jesus that seems to be popular these days. Yeah, or like he's coming to basically give you an emotional massage Jesus. Like that's not actually what he's doing. I mean, there's a lot of even for a Jew, there's a lot of Old Testament resonances, obviously, in the New Testament, and much of what Jesus is saying, where he's chiding people for not taking care of the poor, for not taking care of the widows. That there's nothing really different than anything Jeremiah would have said, for example. And that's harsh stuff. I mean, that's not easy stuff. Right?
So we see Ben here saying, listen, Jesus wasn't above flipping tables. Now, he's quoting a specific passage that we're going to pull up in a minute. But I love what Ben Shapiro also said here in saying, we have Christians now that believe in this type of hippie Jesus who just wants to give you some type of emotional massage. And we clearly see that Jesus that we have seen kind of vamping up in the evangelical church nowadays really doesn't seem to be the Jesus that we read about in the Bible. Yes, Jesus is loving, he's compassionate, he's caring, he's gracious, he's merciful, but he also has wrath and justice. And so the attributes of the Lord are important for us to learn as Christians. And it's something that we should study and read about because he's more than just a loving God. And he's more than just a wrathful vengeance God as well. And so I would encourage you, the listener, go and study the attributes of God. Now, Ben mentioned flipping tables, and George made the comment saying, hey, forgive Jesus. Now, I'm going to, be charitable towards George Janko here. He was just making a joke or whatnot, but Jesus doesn't need to be forgiven of anything. We need to make that clear because Jesus did not sin. Even in the anger we see here with Jesus flipping tables, we clearly see this was a righteous anger, not a sinful anger. And so in Matthew chapter 21, verse 12 through 13, it says, Then Jesus went into the temple of God and drove out all those who bought and sold in the temple, and overturned the tables of money charges and the seats of those who sold doves. And he said to them, It is written, My house shall not be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves. So clearly we see what Jesus is angry about and upset about. This is the temple of the Lord, and people are using it as a means to gain financial money and greed. And Jesus is not for that. We also see the same account in Mark chapter 11, verses 15 to 18, where it says, "So then Jesus came to Jerusalem. Then Jesus went into the temple and began to drive out those who bought and sold in the temple, and overturned the tables of money chargers and the seats of those who sold doves. And he would not allow anyone to carry wares through the temple. He taught, saying to them, Is it not written, My house shall be called the house of prayer for all the nations? But you have made it a den of thieves." And the scribes and chief priests heard it and sought how they might destroy him, for they feared him, because all the people were astonished at his teachings. So, guys, we see here Ben makes a good call out. Jesus did overturn tables, and he did it not in a sinful way, so he doesn't need to be forgiven of anything, but in a righteous anger way. And so, all this being said, guys, I would encourage us to find ourselves not seeking after this hippie Jesus that Ben Shapiro does say many Christians are about nowadays. We need to study the one and the only Jesus that we read in the scriptures from Old to New Testament. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to the BTteam Ministry YouTube channel, as well as drop a like, leave a comment down below. I would love to know your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this video, you might like this one over here.